Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, I have to tell you that I was so excited that Ellen Galinsky was the keynote because we've been using her stuff, Mind in the Making. Sherry works with me in there in the back, and were you so excited to have her? So we're going to make some nice connections with her presentation this morning, but I'm still a little starstruck just because I've been loving her book for years now, and it makes a great gift for new parents. So if you haven't read it, it's written in a really palatable way for folks who aren't real like researchy kind of, I don't want to read a research article. It's just put in such a nice, friendly way for parents and educators. I think you're going to love it. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about building an early learning continuum. Now, how many of you always hear, well, we got to do this because we got to get them ready for first grade, or we got to get them ready for the next year, right? We hear this a lot. We have done just so much work with him, and he said, we have to get away from thinking about getting kids ready for something in the future, the next grade level or what have you, but really think about giving them what they need now. And then guess what? By default, the byproduct is they will be ready. So I thought that was a really change in orientation for me. So kind of keep that in mind. I love that Ellen actually brought that up. Treat them at the age that they're at now. Okay, so I am Julie Montali. I'm actually a psychologist, have been for almost 25 years. And I know you were thinking, how could that be? She's only 17, right? And my kids say, yeah, Mom, that ship sailed a while back. I actually have a 17-year-old turning 18 and a 20-year-old. And then I have a almost 12-year-old. So I'm sort of running the gamut. The third child is another story, although she's about 36, really. You know how those third ones are when they are growing up with the big ones. So she keeps us all on track. But I'm from Fresno Unified. I'm the early learning manager. My focus is in TK and K. When I started almost 10 years ago in the district, I was in special education doing developmental evaluations. Learned all of that back in Syracuse, very progressive in New York. So we were kind of doing things a little bit antiquated in Fresno. So we started doing things a little bit differently and really working with kids and families and getting away from traditional evaluations with 3- and 4-year-olds. What we found is they really needed great language development programs. So that's kind of how I got into sort of that move from special education into early ed. So as I said, a little bit about me, psychologist, working in early learning. That's all you need to know. And today's session, we are going to do a little bit of context setting, a little bit about the Fresno story, talk about the competencies that folks need to lead early learning communities, and we're going to focus on some work we've done in our professional development, instructional practices, super important, and assessment. And then just a little bit, we need to sort of honor partners in the work, and of course our families. What we've really learned in Fresno, can't do it alone. And those of you at the district know that. It's not really even our expertise to get into the littles, right? We have to work with others. I've learned so much because, I was really sort of the traditional K-12 mindset for a long time. Great experiences, but in working with my child development partners, I've learned a ton. And so I just want to sort of recognize that, those folks are super important. We work with First Five. We work with the Housing Authority. Just a whole lot of folks, and we'll talk about them along the way. Let me just tell you just a little bit about Fresno. Anybody know where Fresno is? Your little friends to the south, right, in the Central Valley. Okay, so I've been there for almost 12 years. Actually, we'll be heading back up to the Sacramento area, so I'm excited. I was in Elk Grove as a psychologist years ago, and so it's going to be fun to be, although I have the most amazing team, Sherry being one of them, so I will be missing them greatly. We are about 74,000 kids. We are extremely impoverished district. You probably know that. About a third of our households are female-headed households. About a quarter are English language learners. And you can see our ethnic breakdown right there. And I like to use a lot of pictures so you guys get a kind of a sense of who we are and who we're talking about. So you're going to see a bunch of pictures along the way, too. Now, I know I'm talking to people who don't need convincing of the importance of the investment. However, sometimes we have to sort of have a couple of points that we need to make for others, right? I happen to love James Heckman. Anybody familiar with Heckman? He's, some of you guys. Okay, so he's out of University of Chicago. He is a Nobel laureate in economics. He's a professor of econ and law, and he is amazing. So if you can't convince people that the reason we need to invest in early learning is because it's just simply the right thing to do, we're going to give you some the economics of it. So this is a really short little video.
Everything we know in economics says the return on investment in people, especially very young people, very, very high. Right now, a lot of economists don't have a clue of what's going on. I mean, a lot of economists, and probably me included. But when we start thinking about how to get fixes to get the economy started again, we have to be a little more careful than we've been in the past. We have a big emphasis now on potholes, infrastructure it's called. The new director of OMB, Peter Orszag, has actually written a definitive study of what the economic rate of return is to potholes. And he found that they're pretty low, actually. What I learned and became so important was that investing in people was as important as buildings or structures or roads, although those are important too. There are many projects out there, but few have the rate of return of early childhood investments, offering 10% annual rate of return. So for the same dollars, you can actually invest by training teachers and training children. But what comes out of it is a reduction in crime, the promotion of schooling, the fact that we're going to get a more skilled workforce in the future. There are very, very few government programs that have any return close to this. These rates of return calculations have not entered American political life to the extent they need to. This is not just speculation. This is not, I represent no lobby group. It's a piece of analytical work. Early childhood programs is one of the highest returns that we have on the docket right now available to make in American society. So it's foolish not to use it.
I want you to think about when you talk to others who maybe need a little bit of schooling and why this is important, you've got some really great facts to back you up. Now, a couple of things. In Fresno, we've had to expand programs, really put our money where our mouth is, and really look at the quality, right? You can have access, equity and access, that's a big, big thing for me and for us. However, if the quality isn't there and sustained, that's when you don't get the kind of results later. So, I mentioned a couple of the partners that we've worked with. Here's a bunch of them, and it's certainly not exhaustive. But you get a sense of how many people and agencies it takes. We have to do it from a community standpoint. I'll tell you that the grant work that we've done through the Packard Foundation and First Five has been phenomenal, and it's really at a lot of the root of what we've been able to do with our Principals Academy that I'm going to talk to you a little bit in just a moment. The Housing Authority, we've got about 22,000 of our kids, of the 74,000, who live in homes provided by the Housing Authority. So we've started to do some more partnerships with them, going to them instead of saying, hey, folks, come to the schools. Schools can be a scary place, right? For parents of young families, and perhaps they had terrible experiences. So we need to reach out and say, hey, we'll come to you. And guess what? We're not going to be the big bad school that says, we know everything and we're going to tell you what to do. We have to partner with families from a strength-based approach. Okay, so keep that in mind as we kind of go through. Okay, so making sure that we're all on the same page. And of course, it's really fun to see pictures of cute kids, right? So here's our overview. Birth to 3 years old is kind of that first beginning of that continuum. We have now a center, our early learning center, where we have 6 weeks old through 4-year-olds. So we don't have a lot of babies. In fact, we've got like 189 infants on our waiting list. So we need more programs like that, but we've started down that path. The next little section it will be our pre-K, our 4-year-olds. When I started, we had about 47 classrooms or programs, the AM PM type, all over our elementary schools. We've added many, thanks to Prop 30 back in 2011. We were able to add 20 more classrooms. So we have, and actually we've even added since then. So we've got, I want to say, around 80 teachers, pre-K teachers that we are working with now. And then, of course, our wonderful TK. We started with 2 as a pilot right before kind of TK became, the thing. And then we went to 35. Then we went to 62, and now we're sitting at about 75. We have 1, if not more. We'll have some schools have 2 of our 67 elementary schools. And so it's a fairly big program. We serve about 1,000 kids in TK, and we do not do TKK combinations, which I think has been really important. And we're big enough to kind of be able to not do that. We do have 1 TK expansion program, if you're familiar with that, where you can take in your sort of older 4s, so that next set of months, like the summer months, or sorry, the other way around, the winter months. And when they turn 5, then your district starts collecting ADA for those kids. So that's an interesting prospect for you. And then we've got about 275 kindergarten teachers that we work with. So it's pretty big. So here's just the quick highlights that I just kind of described. In the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of keep on going. Let me tell you one thing about our expansion with our little ones. These are mostly 4-year-olds, but they do bring in some of the 3-year-old numbers. This is not Head Start and Early Head Start, who we now work a lot with. So this is only Fresno Unified programs. So you can see we've more than doubled in the last few years. And so getting access to programs, super important. But my job has really been to focus on the quality. So I want to do that with you. Do we have a brave reader here who can read the mission statement? So you can have a break from me. Thank you, my dear.
To ensure all children in Fresno Unified School District have an equitable start for college, career, and life readiness, the Early Learning Department provides nurturing, child-centered environments and high-quality educational programs that value and respect the needs, languages, and cultures of all students, families, staff, and community.
So just take about, thank you, that was lovely. In your fake mic, I'm only kidding. So just take a moment and, do like a little 10-second think, and then just a chat about what words or key phrases pop off the page to you for that. What do you think is important in there to you personally? Go ahead and turn to an elbow partner and shout out a couple of things to each other.
Definitely equitable start for all students.
Respect the needs, language, and cultures of all students and families.
Looking like definitely bringing in families.
I have to tell you a funny story. So I love my chimes, and Sherry knows I won these in a new teacher center PLC facilitation training. So they're very, very special to me. I'm not competitive or anything. So I use those a lot because I think we do a lot of call and response in our professional development because we want teachers to do different kind of strategies, right, to have kids talking and then come back to us. I really like the chimes when I came across these because it's not that hard stop. So it gives you kind of that, like you hear it so you can finish your thought. So I always tell people, get a set of chimes when you're working with groups of people or in a classroom, or something like it, because it has that nice reverb. So that's just a little aside thing that I stole from somebody else. Okay, so just a quick shout out. Things that you saw in there that you go, yeah, that needs to be in there.
Equitable start.
Equitable start. Excellent. What else? High quality, super important.
Respect the needs of language and culture of all students, families, and staff.
So we're talking about all stakeholders being responsive culturally and linguistically, correct? Okay, excellent. Anything else? Child-centered, absolutely important. And that's part of that really building the early learning continuum. People are okay with kids, little ones, having that, the child-centered. We seem to be okay, but once you go into kindergarten, because they're all 5 and 6 years old, right? We better get them in desks and, taking the SAT tomorrow. So, you laugh, but I am serious, right? Have you had that experience? So, and I'll tell you our experience, and Sherry, she's laughing back there, because when we started in pre-K, there was a little bit of like TK, people weren't sure what's the deal with that? Should it look like kinder? Should it not? What should it look like? And then we took TK over in our department, and so, they're the big building, we call the big kids next door to us. We're kind of in a smaller building in early learning, the annex. So we kind of always refer to the big kids next door. Well, the big kids next door, they finally gave us kindergarten, and we stopped having that big gap between pre-K, TK, and kinder. Guess where the gap is now? Kindergarten first. So as we're working with more and more principals, they are really noticing it, and they are key people, I'll tell you that. So, access to quality programs, high quality, you cannot go away from that. When people like to cite studies like, pre-K, it's not a silver bullet, doesn't work. See, there's no results later, right? We've got those studies. Wrong. When you sustain the work, it works. And we have proof of that, right? So, in our PLs, we don't want teachers getting sit and get. Right? In fact, because of the small time we have together, this is actually a little bit more of me a lot more of me talking than I typically would like to do. But I kind of want to just give as much stuff to you as I possibly can. Lessons learned from Fresno. We have people they're choosing where they want to go. We have breakout sessions. We have coaches facilitating at all tables, so it's really personal. There's a lot of clarifying. We do demo days where teachers are in small groups with their grade level. We call them accountable communities. You've heard PLCs are, right, the big thing, and they're wonderful. So we do that. We have a coach. For instance, Sherry will take a couple of her groups. They'll see a demo teacher. So they're seeing their own peers. They do some learning. They do some reading. They do some planning. They might see a video. Very active, you guys. We want them to teach in that way, so we want them to learn in that way. And one of the things we have found that really builds the continuum is the visual arts program. So, one of my partners in crime, one of my literacy coaches, she actually is an art major and art teacher, has been teaching for over 40 years, fabulous person. And just a kick in the pants. So we have a lot of fun together. We wrote a pre-K visual arts integrated curriculum. It's right up over there. Sherry, you can hold that up. It's just a little spiral. And what we heard from teachers, thank you, that's Vanna, thank you. What we heard from teachers, it's building language. I'm not an expert in this, so it's actually helping because I put this print up and then the kids are telling me what they see. And I'm not worried about whether I know it all. So the onus is now on kids. It's developing language in our English learners. I mean, all of these really cool things started to come out of it. So TK says, well, we want one. So we sat down on a summer and we wrote that, and it got a little bit thicker. Guess what happened? Kindergarten says, come on, we want one too. Went from the 1.5-inch notebook to the 2-inch binder. It's like getting bigger and bigger. I finally said, I can't do it anymore. Plus, again, our friends next door, that's a little hard for them because we adopt a curriculum, and anyway, since this is being videotaped, I can't say any more than that. So, our big buckets through everything that we do. And the visual arts is such a great common thread for this. Language and social emotional development. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but that's where it's at. When you look at Common Core and you look at collaborative academic conversations, we're not going to start that in 3rd grade, in 5th grade, in 7th grade. We have all kinds of things that our little ones can do. They're turning and talking. They're learning how to question. And I'm telling you, the visual arts has provided a lot more than I ever thought in that domain. So I'll show you a little bit about that in a minute. Here are some examples of our teachers in their PLs. You can see, they're actually doing things that we want them to do with their little ones. They're working in collaborative art, and then we process and debrief what kinds of things come out of that. When we have kids in structures that here's the red yarn, here's the blue yarn, you're going to go here, you're going to go there. Are we developing those things that Ellen was talking about this morning? Are we giving kids opportunities? Or think about what Braggleton, amazing to see him, right? I just feel like he's going to live forever. Working with that little baby and how basically teaching her and facilitating her to self-regulate, a newborn. So think about in your classroom as a teacher, as a district leader, as a support person, how much are you promoting giving kids opportunities to self-regulate rather than you regulating them? Now, there's really structured, and then there's free-for-all. I'm not talking about free-for-all. I'm talking about where's that balance. And, people are going to sit within a gamut. That's I think very acceptable. We have people they're just more structured type of people. And then there are people who can tolerate a lot more going on around them. That's okay within here, as long as it's not here, way structured, here, super free for all. That make sense to you? Okay. Talk for just a minute about what you would like to see improved for your PL if you were a teacher, or if you're delivering PL, how can you make it more impactful by having people talk more, think more, have choice, have more teacher agency in it? Are you using your best teachers as demos, whether through a video or through live? Because we're so limited on time, I'm only going to let you talk for a minute though, okay? All right, go. Talk. There's your question. What could be improved for you?
One of the things we want to do is in the afternoon actually have the teachers immersed as TK students. So have this different station set up, let them choose which station they want to go to, let them actually experience play, experience joy, and then do a reflection at the end. So instead of them just listening, we're going to do that. And so that's something I feel like we need to do more of beyond our TK teachers, but just in general.
Now, principals and central office leaders. Thank you, James. See, they're going forever. So we have found principals side-by-side learning with their teachers essential, absolutely essential. And you can have the greatest coaches and teachers who are, wanting to work with you and are willing to make changes and do all that kind of great stuff. But if you don't have the support of the site leader, who is very important in setting the tone, then you will not have the kind of impact that you could. And we've really seen that working with different sites in Fresno. Principals who are really on board, they may participate in the academy, which I'm going to tell you about in a second. There's such a difference when they are really hearing and listening and in there with their teachers. Here's one of our wonderful teachers there, Lynn, and a couple of others, Steve and Sandra, really working with their teachers in very active ways so that they get to actually participate and understand when they walk into a classroom, this is what the kids are doing. They're not just kind of hanging out looking at some pretty picture, right? It makes such a difference. One of the biggest things that I think has made a difference with our principals is we had a chance to put together an early learning academy. And in your packet, you'll see there's a pink sheet. It's based on leading a brief. Could you hold that up for me, my dear? It's the second one in from the math. Yep. And this is online. This is from the National Association of Elementary School Principals. Just came out 2014-15. And so spring of 2015, we had some grant money to get this started. We are now in our 5th semester of doing this. We do it on a semester basis, and it gives us a chance to give a little knowledge through some dinner sessions. We give them a little food. That always helps, right? Chocolate helps too. So we do a once a month session at night. Then we have in between, we have some small group sessions. I actually have them do some practicums, have them do some reading, limited because I give them lots of resources, Mind in the Making being one of them, I have to tell you. And look, Ellen didn't even pay me for that, really. She doesn't write me a check or anything. She doesn't even know me. But we do make sure that they're doing their side-by-side work with their teachers and really immersing themselves in it. They also get individual coaching, which this semester's course group, I've got 18 of them. And so right now, I've like basically calendared up my whole month of May going and doing individual learning walks with them. And it's really, they have been absolutely an amazing group. So we're about 90% the way through with all our principals, and we've actually added VPs into it. Again, need to sustain it, right? So it can't be just one person. The more that get it, the more it's going to stay, and it's hardwired then into the system. Okay, so this is an interesting question. So we started out with a little bit of money, so we could give them about $3,000. Actually, we did a little bit more on the first cohort, and we had 8 slots. And of course, as I call them, my friends next door. I really do love them. I work a lot with them. But they said, "Oh, Julie, you'll be lucky if you get like 4 or 5." We put out the notice through email. It filled that day. We doubled it. We said, "Okay, Packard, we have 16 that want to get in," and that's about doable, right? Because then I'm doing all this individual coaching. More than that, you can't give them sort of all what they need. So every single time we've had a wait list for like the next one. Can I get in the next one? Can I get in the next one? I thought, oh, they just want the money for it, right? So crazy. The first session when we're doing the introductions and this is what's happening, this is what to expect, blah, 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 blah. Here's your, binder with all your resources. When I say, okay, so then you need to start thinking about how you're going to use your funds to support the work. And that might be some training, some release time, some actual materials. If we are talking about great hands-on centers, do they have the materials that they need? Half of them are looking at me, "We get money for this?" I about fell over. I said, "You mean you're here? Are you here because of the dinner? Because I'm feeding you?" And they said, "No, we've heard that this has been," after that first group, they said, "We've heard that this is something that is not only serving us for our early learning, but it's serving our kids all the way up." Let me just show you one really quick, I won't show you the whole thing in the interest of time, but let me just show you, we actually filmed sort of like a reflection from people.
The importance of what happens in those early grades will also impact of how they see their students coming in the intermediate grades.
The impact in joining the early learning program, the class sessions, has been specifically to my kindergarten classes, being able to be part of that, delivering first line lessons, partnering with my teachers, and really moving through the learning process side by side with them. It's also really put me in a place where I am sitting right down in the classroom and digging in with the kids and having what really truly peer-to-peer conversations with my teachers, which I really love. I think it's really shifted how we have conversations about early learning, how we have conversations about the work that impacts our students on the site and really the parents in the greater community. When I look at the future for my site, our conversations have shifted, not just in our preschool program and our early learning program, but as really we grow into 6th grade, the conversations have really given power to our early learning professionals and the work they do and the true diligence that it takes to lay that foundation for kids. And it's driving how it looks all the way up to 6th grade.
It's really shaped the way we view our early learning.
So I'd love to show you the whole thing, but we'll move on. But you get a sense of, from what Kim is talking about, how it really wasn't just about what was happening in pre-K or TK or even kindergarten, but really how, when you walk into a 1st grade or 2nd grade, if these kids, when they're 4, 5, and 6, really know how to do different kinds of talk structures and talk moves, because we really focused on that, then why are we going to have them in desks in rows and doing the one hand quiet raised hand, right? If I hear quiet raised hand one more time in my life, I'm going to go jump off a bridge. So you get that sense. So let's see. Oh, I just put stuff down all over you guys. My kids say I do that at home too. So these are the 6 competencies that are in the leading pre-K to 3rd grade learning communities. And again, I love to give the quote. So Whit, who I was mentioning before, Hayslip from LA and now with Packard, he says, we used to always talk about birth through 8 years old. He said, but as I get older, and he's a little bit older than me, but not much. He says, it's really like birth through death years old. And I did giggle at that. I said, oh, Whit, my God. But it's true, right? We're all kind of kids at heart. We want to be engaged. Honestly, this is painful for me to have you guys just kind of sit and because our PLs, we're up and we're moving, and I promise you our closure actually is going to get you up and moving. But it's important to have active learning. And that, that's how our brains are constantly making those connections, not only when we're teeny ones, but when we're older too. In fact, it's almost, even that much more important again. So let me take you through just a few of the competencies or points that I think are really worth thinking about. So, in our short time. So we looked at the Heckman quick video. The vision. If you understand that long-term value, you can communicate that with folks. One of the things that's super important right on your site is to think about, how do the foundations and standards align? What's very interesting is that there are some that you will see a really nice developmental sequence progression. There are some that seem to have kind of a weird jump. And there's actually some where you look in the preschool foundations and they're actually more rigorous than the kindergarten Common Core standards. That doesn't happen a ton, but there's a couple of them. What I like to do is let me ask you, how many of you guys are familiar with this alignment document? Great. This is a really handy dandy thing to, you can go online. It's easy to find. You just Google alignment, foundations, and standards, and boom, it comes right up. This is really, really good. And those of you who are at a site are like, okay, so I have, maybe pre-K or TK or even K. And a lot of times the work that we're doing in our staff PLs, it doesn't apply, or they have to sort of really make it apply. There are things that you can do across the system that really will get people to understand that the foundations are important for them to know, even if they, to some degree, even if they aren't teaching that level. In your little packet, I have for you 2. I am full service. Oh, there you go. They have, and if we ran out, I think I've got the plan back there. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. You've got 2 examples of standards that one's math, one's ELA, that run from 48, 60 month kindergarten. And I want you to just look at that continuum. It should be, there's 2 of them, and they're white, and one's a geometry standard and one is a phonological awareness standard. You don't have to take both of them, so we can keep it kind of on the quick side. But take one of those, and with a partner, kind of look at what that sequence looks like. What does it look like to you? Does it seem like there is kind of a nice, step 1, step 2, step 3? Is it in a sequence that makes sense? Is it very similar? And you think, oh my goodness, wait, if we're doing this in pre-K, but we're also doing it in kinder, what does that mean? So have just a small chat with a partner as you're looking at those standards together. One or both of them. It's up to you. Any call-outs? Anything you kind of notice about that alignment or that continuum? I hear lots of conversation. Somebody's got something. Those brains are cooking. What are you guys talking about? I heard a couple things that you said were interesting.
I noticed the build.
Okay. So at least the ones that we're looking at, there's some building. Okay. Anything else?
Well, a real discussion got taken away from this. You know, the fact that I'm very rural.
Mm-hmm.
So I live in Plumas County, and there's only 4 TKK classrooms, and most of my peers are busy doing kindergarten, and it's just like this little modified, pop-in for 3 or 4 students. And I'm a part of the Child Care Council and the PLC, and the grief that I hear from those preschool people and early learning people about TK, and I really want to make it a good program, but it's hard to express it and have people buy on board. And so sorry.
So
really different.
So
from the
it is
learning
hard.
about the foundations,
Right. It's hard because of your situation. Not impossible, but much more challenging. We are gonna. I think that there are probably lots of us who struggle with that, even in the bigger system, right? Where how does TK even look different than kinder or pre-K, or what does that mean? And we've got kids along this developmental continuum. So looking at these alignment documents, I think are really important, because then you start thinking about individual kids and meeting their needs, as opposed to, this is kinder and this is TK and this is even pre-K, right? Because if you have a mixture of kids. We're going to actually look at a very specific example in a few minutes that's about emergent writing that might be just a really good example for you tangibly to see this is how this can work, but it's really about how do I meet an individual need. So I've got a TKK combo. Those kids, and if you go into a kinder, you're still going to have a huge range, right? When we in Fresno have some of our kids going to, you saw, 3,000 are going to our pre-K TK programs. However, that means half of them are not. And so we've got about 6,000 in kinder in Fresno Unified, right? So not that every one of those other 3,000 are not getting some early learning experience, but a great number of them are not. Or we know it's not at the same quality that we work on, because we've got control over that, right? So even in a kindergarten, you might have a kid walking in who doesn't know colors, doesn't know shapes, has not had those experiences. And then you've got a kid who's basically reading and writing because they've had pre-K and maybe even TK. That's huge, right? So I think when we get to the writing, it'll give you just a really tangible example, because I think it might speak to you. So hold tight with that. Now, how many have had the experience where DAP is a dirty word? Okay, so again, going back to my best friends next door, I added best to friends. They are coming along, but they've had a harder time understanding what that means. And so for a long time, guess what? I stopped using it. I didn't use it because it was sort of looked at as, oh, that's a cop-out, or that means they're not ready for. And so then I started using sort of this, if you know development appropriate, then you know that means high cognitive. But I figured if I threw in the words high cognitive developmentally appropriate practice, which is a mouthful, let me tell you, but that would help. That would help, right? It bridges. Thank you. Good word. So that's what I started doing, and now it's coming along. Now they're understanding what it means, and I'm going to say the Principals Academy was the biggest coup ever. I just didn't know, but it really was. So we started looking at this great little gem, the basics of DAP in kindergarten. Really good resource. So make sure that and seriously, I do not know Phillips and Scrinzi, and I don't even know if I'm saying their name right, but this is fabulous because it really gives folks that one-on-one, what does it really mean to be DAP? It means that I'm making decisions that vary and adapt with kids, the group, the instruction, the curriculum, all of these things, right? It balances the standards or the foundations, the what, with the instructional practices. If we're going to talk about building a continuum, we got to talk about how the pedagogy goes from here to here to here as they grow. It's not going to be the same, but it's got to be seamless, right? So if I teach my little ones how to turn and talk and how to get up and find a new partner and to do this and that, to give them opportunities to choose where they're going to go for at least part of the day, to pick a center that's of interest and let them stay there for not the 12 and a half minutes and ding my bell, right? There's got to be parts of your day that we have them choosing. But it's a balance because some is teacher directed and some is child directed. So again, it's that I'm looking this is my new thing. I discovered when I was talking to the principals last week, literally last week. Everything is sort of on this spectrum. And the extremes are, right? But we've got this sort of gamut that we can run that works, but still is appreciative and honoring of a particular teacher's style. Because we're different, right? Again, some of us, we need a little bit more structure. Some of us, we can tolerate a little bit more. I do tell principals, if you walk in your classrooms, the first big red flag is silence. They love that one. Guess what? Over the last 3 years of doing the academy, I almost don't even have to tell them that anymore. And I think part of that is because collaborative conversations are so important in the upper grade world, right, with Common Core, that they're really realizing, oh, you're not going to just start teaching that when they're 8 or 10 or 12. They have to learn that at 4, and guess what? They're super capable. So I love that. Considering DAP means what's age appropriate, what's individually appropriate, and what's culturally, socially, and linguistically responsive and appropriate. So none of that says not ready, not capable, whatever little cop-out kind of things. So keep that in mind. Love that little book. It's a goodie. Now, love the fact that we got a chance to hear from, well, it's really kind of nice to say the horse's mouth, right? She might not appreciate that, but the rock star herself, because this is something that we started using when we opened the Principals Academy. How many of you have come from districts and whatnot that really look at academic and then socio-emotional and talk about it in sort of two different planes? We actually used to have this triangle that literally was split down the middle, and one side, you remember that, Sherry? One side was academic, one side said socio-emotional. I think part of that was well intended to say we got to call it out as important, but they're not two sides. These are not soft skills. They are not non-cognitive skills. That drives me crazy, you guys. Every time I hear that, I think, but you can't get any more cognitive. And I love that she said that this morning. I think for principals, for central office leaders, for anybody who kind of this whole early learning world is, it's a little different for them, right? And look, here's the case. If you ask most principals, they didn't teach pre-K, TK, kindergarten. They actually didn't get any training in their admin program on it, right? And now we're throwing things like DAP, and we want kids up and moving, and we want flexible seating, and we want all these things that they're like, whoa, like you're throwing way too much at me, right? So this I found actually is a great frame to combine the academic sort of thought and thinking and standardsy stuff with the social and emotional functioning. And I put the 4 C's up here. You may be familiar with communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. You'll hear people reference them as the 4 C's. So if we're talking about this kind of language, it's about translating our early learning world into language that the K-12, sort of traditional K-12 folks will understand. And I love that because I'm part of that world. I get it. I needed to understand the bridge, and now I feel like I've sort of become the bridge. I love this one. Isn't that funny? I get a kick out of that. My team, says, yeah, that's you over there. So we heard a lot about executive function this morning, and I love little, mnemonics. So I remember this by ABE, right? ABE, managing attention, behavior, and emotion. And it's such the core, as we heard this morning, of so many things that we are expecting out of our college, career, and life-ready folks. And again, you can't start it when they're going into high school. So, how many of you are familiar with the Volume 1 foundations? Okay, definitely our teachers and some of our other folks. Okay, so that's sort of the meat and potatoes. There's a Volume 2 and 3. Love it. There's tons of great stuff. Visual arts, music, nutrition, physical development, sciences, blah, blah, blah. The meat and potatoes is in Volume 1. You've got language and literacy, you've got ELD, you've got socio-emotional, and you've got math. Now, what's really interesting is if you take the SEL foundations and you work with a group of secondary folks, they're looking at it and they're like, they're supposed to do this by the time they're 60 months. I have 10th graders who I would love if they could do this, right? So really using that with our folks that are working either as supervisors or actual teachers, just so they understand. And they will be the first people to say, oh my goodness, if my high school kids, and anybody who's a parent of a high school kid, yes? Anybody? Yeah? Then you can relate, right? It's like, I wish my 17-year-old son, who I'm sending off to college, he's going to play football, so I'm hoping that, coach and other people will keep him straight. Now, I do have, and we did hear from Ellen this morning, the 3 kind of pieces that are really important in working memory, are working memory, inhibitory control, and that mental or cognitive flexibility. Again, think about your classroom if you're a teacher. Think about your classrooms at your site. Think about what you're promoting in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Are you giving kids opportunities to develop these kinds of things? Because if it's all about sitting in a desk in a row and all whole group and all teacher directed all the way through, you're not going to get those kids ready to be career ready, to be life ready, to be college ready. Interestingly, I have 3 nieces and nephews who graduated college last year. One works for Facebook, one works for Google, and one works for Yelp. I know, isn't that funny? If you ask them about their office, their building, their situation, they're doing exactly what Ellen was talking about, that it's about working in teams, it's collaborative spaces. It's a different world than many of us sort of look to, what office work and that sort of thing would be 20 years ago, right? If we don't start them early enough, then we're doing such a disservice to our whole nation, honestly. So kind of thinking about that, we opened Patino High School. It's the first it's a nationally recognized first entrepreneurial high school. It's a 10-12. They will run companies by the time they are graduated. This is not a gate school. This isn't, select just the brightest and the best. This is, you want to come, you come. It's amazing. So I was talking to one of our assistant soups who's over principals, and I love her because she's been doing a lot of early learning walks with me, and we're really, she's getting a really good sense of how environment can either support or be an obstacle to the kind of pedagogy that we want. Lots of talking, lots of student talk, blah, 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 right? So we were doing a walk, and we went into a 2nd grade. And of course, the coaches that are working at that level, they immediately went to, well, what was the focus standard? I'm not against that, standards-based person, absolutely. But they missed some of the most basic things about the environment that the teacher was doing all the work. So how do we go from where kids are choosing and learning and working with different adults to now the adults doing all the work a couple of years later? It's a little silly, right? And then we're going to send them to a place like Continuum High School or to work for Google or Yelp or Facebook? Like, come on, guys, let's be logical about this. There's a progression here. So she sent that whole site team to the high school that I was talking about, Patino, to see what that environment looked like. Should we invest in some flexible seating? Should we, so think about those little things in the environment that could make the difference, right? Does it support or hinder the pedagogy? If you want kids talking, the environment has to be set up to help that. Or it's really, frankly, going to be a pain because it's hard to get kids up and moving if it's only the tables and desks that are enjoying the room. Get some of that furniture out. Seriously, I've said your desks and tables are enjoying the room, and they kind of look at me and I said, because your stuff is set up around the perimeter for kids to walk around, but how does that serve you? So look for those things that might be just right under your nose. Okay, let's see, you guys. We are going to, you got a chance to see a little bit about the executive function. So let me check how we're doing on time here. Oh, we're doing fine. Let's go back and see, I told you I talk fast. We're going to watch just a 2-3 minute little video here on executive function. If you are interested in a great resource, the Harvard Child Development Institute has wonderful little videos that you can have your teachers watch yourself, watch at a grade level or a PLC. And you'll recognize that, I think, I don't know if they're in this one, but a couple of the folks that we saw earlier. Anyway, take a look.
What is executive function?
Safety goggles. Probably the best way to think about it is sort of like an air traffic control system in the brain. Just like an air traffic control system has to manage lots of airplanes going on lots of runways and really exquisite timing and so on, a child has to manage a lot of information and avoid distractions. We really think of it as involving working memory and inhibitory control and mental flexibility. Take a situation where a child is having to take turns. So first of all, the child has to have inhibitory control. The child has to be able to stop whatever he or she is doing and let the other child take a turn.
Cute.
But when it's your turn again, you also have to remember what it is you're supposed to be doing. So that pulls on working memory. If the children who are taking the turns after you do something unpredictable, you have to be able to adjust what you're going to do next. And that requires mental flexibility. Children who are struggling with these capacities often look like children who just aren't paying attention, or children who are deliberately not controlling themselves.
If you don't have self-regulation, you act out and the teacher puts you in timeout, and so then you miss part of the learning that's going on, and then you are more upset because you're behind, and so you act out, and so you get this downward spiral.
Okay. So between a little bit of the video that you saw earlier this morning and that one, getting a pretty good sense, if you didn't know before, and you're probably coming in with some idea anyway, about executive function and the fact that it's trainable. I think that's amazing. That was a really big aha to me years ago when I started really looking at the brain research behind this. Especially when we're talking about a population, a community where the homes are often very chaotic. We've got kids living on the street. I have a kiddo that I sort of adopted, who, and I don't mean officially, but he's actually 19 now. I wish I had him since he was, 6 or 7. I got him as a 17-year-old, got him graduated through high school, and now he and we stay up late working on papers together for Fresno City College. But I realized that he's having to learn things now at 17, 18, 19, he'll be 20 in July, that, he didn't have the opportunity to learn when he was just a little guy. But even still now, we're working on step-by-step training of these things. So what I'd like you to do, and take a look at some of this is how you see some academics and some socio-emotional really intertwined, right? Where do you see those 7 life skills in here? In your role, how do you support children in developing executive function through opportunities that we would consider DAP? Now, in your packet, you have, I love this, from NIASP, the 10 effective strategies for DAP. In Fresno, our district uses what's called an instructional practice guide. It's kind of like a walkthrough tool. How many of you guys in your districts have like walkthrough tools where administrators are coming through and they're looking for certain things, right? Okay, so we have this, and we're it's a very big important part of what the district does. It doesn't serve early learning as well as it serves some of the upper grades. So what I did is I took this and I had the principals in our academy sit side by side with it and figure out, hey, is this in support of our instructional practice guide or is it against? So, because sometimes we're having to, again, translate the language between early learning thinking and language to that sort of traditional K-12 thinking world, right? So if you have something that your district is using, I encourage you to do that, is take this with the walkthrough tool and see. I'll bet you anything that it supports it. But sometimes what happens is, the district sort of higher ups that don't really understand early learning as well as they might, they'll say, oh, we're not using that. That's something else. That's something different. Now you're giving them something else. And so when we show, no, we are a little different, right? We're a little qualitatively different, but we're still in support. It's still a continuum. I also want you to think about the very subtle difference between alignment and continuum. Have you ever thought about that? We used to talk a lot about, we're aligned. Well, I guess if you looked up the Webster definition, yeah, okay, we are. But sometimes it's just that subtle little connotation that's a little different. So what I do now, as I've learned, because I'm learning every day, right? Rather than speak to it in alignment, I speak to it in continuum, because it's qualitatively different, but still sequenced and still progressing. So take a look at the DAP, the 10 effective strategies. Think about your role as a teacher, administrator, a partner in the work from a different agency. How can you use these and what you know about DAP to create opportunities for kids to really hone in and develop those social emotional, those executive function skills? Think about what Ellen was saying this morning. I'll give you just a minute to kind of think about that and then have a little chat at your tables, okay? All right, go. And I find it's helpful maybe, circle a couple of the ones that really are where you think this is priority for me. Again, if you're a teacher, what do you want to really hone in on next week in your classroom? And if you're an administrator, what do you want to look for? And then go ahead and have a chance to just kind of elbow chit chat.
Okay, so what I would do is, first of all, review all of them, look at all of the different strategies and make sure that have them in my tool bag. And when teachers are teaching, they have multiple things going on in the classroom. Figure out which one I'm going to pull up and use.
Will you throw those on the ledge?
Put them up around the room somewhere.
What I noticed about it is that she talked about the students being flexible thinkers. And I feel like a teacher being observant and knowing when to embed these strategies in their instruction also models being cognitively flexible. And I was thinking that a lot of these relate to like the cognitive level of the student experience. It pulls in some discourse. It also is an opportunity to like recognize their effort as opposed to the focus on the answers. And there's also opportunities for a lot of interaction when you look at all of these different strategies. Interactions between students and also interactions between students and teachers.
Besides the chimes, you guys, the other things we often will do is call and response. So if I said 1 fish, 2 fish, what would you say? Red fish, blue fish. The teachers knew that. All right, so here's a funny one that I've used. I'm a competitive soccer coach as well in my spare time. So I use some of these with my girls, and it's pretty funny. So the one that I learned from Claudia, my partner in crime and writing partner in crime, because she's got 100 of these things, and she said, "Oh, I've got a good one. You teach the kids. You say, you say, 'Hear ye, hear ye,' and the kids say, 'All eyes on the queen.'" So you can imagine, or you can teach the king. You can imagine that I'm on the soccer field, right? And I've got, at the time, like my 11-year-olds. And you know, there are other women coaches, but, you know, for the most part, there's mostly guys out there. And so when I'm calling them back, you know, I yell, "Hear ye, hear ye." And now this whole group of kids come running, "All eyes on the queen." And you just see the guys with their heads just whip around like, "Really, Julie? Really?" So, but it's a good one. So I want you to use it at whatever point you have. Okay, so I told you a little bit about the visual arts curriculum. Some of the things that we've really seen come out of it is the fact that it's really incredible content, right? It's engagement. There was a Harvard article that recently came out that the opposite of boredom in the classroom isn't entertainment, it's engagement. Right? Engagement doesn't mean, you know, you're turning cartwheels. It's putting out interesting things. And sometimes it's just the easiest thing. I have a teacher, she stuck a pumpkin in a glass jar and that thing just decomposed. And the kids, they used all kinds of recording tools, worksheets. We actually had a funeral for worksheets. That's another story. I literally, with taps and a black veil. And I mean, we really had to emphasize it. So anyway, and it's better, since we buried it. But fostering oral language development, it's incredible. And then sort of the obvious creativity, right? I mean, we're still trying to move some folks away from, I try not to be brash and go in and say, "You know how to glue. Let them do it." I'm not worried about your cutting skills. Let them cut. Don't give them templates. They can do it. People need to move away from cookie cutter craft kind of stuff, which, it has its place, sort of. I'll just say that. Not really, but, a little bit. But it's really about kids getting the chance to, cut and glue and be creative and write. And anyway, we'll go on. So just a couple of quick photos. This is one of our 4-year-old classrooms in collaborative art. So fun, you guys. So cool. What a great way to develop language, self-regulation, fine motor skills. And this was the piece. It's huge. It's about big. It's about as big as the screen. Not quite as tall, but it's about as big as the screen. Any guesses what it is? Yay! See, you guys are already experts. Okay. And like I told you, we built a lot around language development. And you can't develop language development without, at the same time, building up what? Social and emotional, right? Like in talk structures, you don't say, "Okay, now we're going to work on language development. We'll work on social development at 11:15, right? 11:30. It works together. So you're killing two birds with one stone. Super important. Now, how many of you guys know research on student talk versus teacher talk? Heard a little bit about that? Okay, Fisher, Fry, Hattie in particular, great stuff. If you look at effect sizes of what really works, we know that student talk, academic discourse, right? Put it in your fancy terms. Basically, getting kids talking about the content, it gives them about 2 years worth of learning within 1 year. Okay, super important stuff. Class Gather, this little signal here, is an app. You can get it right on your phone. You can get the free one if you don't want to pay for it, which works just fine because that's what we use. It's the administrator edition. You click a button for student talk, click a button for teacher talk. You can do it school-wide. You can do it grade level. You can say, hey, you guys, we're really trying for, to get as close as we can to 50-50 language, right? So we started doing that because I personally set a goal for my team, from our work, that we would try to get as close in kindergarten as we could to 50-50 talk. It doesn't take into consideration the quality of the talk. But until you get kids talking, you got to go quantity first. I'm just going to tell you. And you got to be patient with it because, sometimes you'll go, I'll have a coach say to me, but Jules, the talk was really high, but it was really not good. And it's okay. It's all right. Because the first thing is we're looking at how much kids are talking. Next step, phase 2, quality of that talk. And that's where we are now. So just if you're at the beginning of that, just know it's okay to take it stage by stage. All right, let's talk a little bit about assessment. Testing versus collecting data, context matters. So, as I told you, being a soccer coach, I think in sports analogies. It's kind of like I look at kids and what they technically can do in drills, like cone drills and other kinds of set-up technique drills. I had a kid last year who was flawless in drills. Put her on a soccer field where there's referees, opponents, especially, parents on the sideline, It was like a completely different kid. So when you think about that in the classroom, are you authentically, like in the game, assessing kids? Or are we doing everything pull out one-on-one in that sort of, are we focused on rote sort of discrete skills? Are we looking at context? So I want to give you an example of what that looks like very practically. I copied this into your packet. It's a little developmental writing progression, and we've used it in pre-K, TK, and kindergarten. So here's one very specific way that you guys can walk away and go, you know what? This is something that's usable right with our folks today, in our classroom today, and with our individual kids. Take just a second to look at this. What you'll notice is that there's just the basics of what's happening at each of these little levels. Okay, and we go up to where it's more conventional. If you flip over, there are goals associated with how to move kids, and they're just little basic ones, but how to move kids to that next level. So for instance, in TK, here's a couple of examples I just pulled a few days ago. This one was to the question, what animal, if they had read the artist who painted a blue horse, the Eric Carle book, great book. So they got a chance to write and draw. What animal would you add to the story? And so she added her little striped donkey. The donkey was striped. And then you'll see another little guy over here, and you'll see the teacher put a little sticky there for me, draw, write, and talk. So he said, this is there looking at the artist. Van Gogh is my favorite. He paints fast with lots of texture. How many 4 to 5 year olds know that, huh? Very good. How are we doing? Tell you a really quick story. If I can just do 2. Okay, so one is that this whole idea of English language learners. We had a little guy, pre-K, walked in, Russian, Armenian, no English. He says to his mom, nah, not going to learn it. Not going to learn it. Nope, forget it. Not going to learn it. And mom just says, I don't know what to do. Teacher says, don't worry about it. He's going to come. He's going to enjoy. He's going to figure it out. Let him do it at his own pace. 2 months into the year, they start working on Picasso. Guess what? And there's wonderful children's books related to the masters, and we run the gamut. Diego Rivera, Faith Ringgold, who's one of our few of the artists that's actually still alive. But we try to really make sure that we're hitting lots of kids from different cultures and ethnic backgrounds, and so it's really fun. So we get to Picasso, and he is desperate to know what this teacher is saying about Picasso. Like, this book just intrigues him. By the end of the year, so that's our little catalyst. By the end of the year, they do CELT testing. Doesn't need any support. Fluent English speaker. Mother's like, I cannot believe this. And we're just like, oh yeah, we did that on purpose. It was a byproduct that I really, until these stories started coming out, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so important. And they're also mostly the kids who aren't going to go to New York City and see the Met. They're not going to go to LA and get to see the Getty. We bring it to them. It's really super important that they get this full, important curriculum. One other quick one is that we had a little guy who was in a furniture store. And you know how, like, a lot of times they have, like, the prints multiple all over the place? Well, there was a Kandinsky, which is, you've seen it, it's like color circles and squares, right? And it looks sort of like a patchwork quilt type of thing. And he says, oh, that's a Kandinsky. Dad's like, come on, honey, really, don't make up stuff kind of thing. No, Dad, really, it's a Kandinsky. Dad's like, okay, I'm going to look this up. By George, it's a Kandinsky, So really fun things come out of this anyway. So here, Van Gogh was his favorite. And so you can kind of see the Van Gogh is my favorite. Now, by looking at that, what do I need to do to work on stuff with kids, okay? So here in kinder, when we get just a little bit more serious, right, because we want to make sure writing is fun, it's incorporated in lots of things that we do, but it's a joy, it's not a chore. And so giving kids opportunities. Well, we taught the teachers about how to do writing goals. And so one of the teachers took that, and you can see all these sticky notes, their kids' names about what their little immediate goal is for that day or that week. Right? And the kids actually can start to choose when they look at things like, say, let's go back to this guy here, that, well, I need to put more spaces in there, right? So maybe, and I actually don't have this up in TK, it's in kinder, but you're going to have lots of kinders that are going to look like that too. And then you say, oh, then I'm going to have I'm going to use my finger spaces, right? So some really fun ways that kids can be involved in their learning that makes it kid-friendly. It's authentic. And think about how many foundational skills you can do with this in the application of it, in the game, in the context, without pulling up what letter, what sound, what letter, what sound. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't sometimes times that you need to do that. Maybe a kid's really inconsistent and you're like, I just got to do a quick check. Okay, that's fine. But opportunities to write, you get so much information. So there's my little soapbox about authentic assessment, and there's lots of great stuff out there if you are interested. Okay, so the two last competencies in pre-K, leading pre-K to third learning communities in that brief. And I do highly recommend that you get that. You can even just print out the PDF. You don't even have to order it. Number 5 has to do with taking this sort of look across your site and how does this build capacity in the adults? We have to build capacity in the adults who are working with the kids, right? Whether that's families or the actual educators. This is about sort of more the educators. We're going to look at competency 6 to end with that has to do with families. So we've touched on a lot of little things throughout our time together. We've looked at some things with assessment. We've talked about some things about language development. Brought up hopefully some specific things that maybe you'll take back, whether it's the writing development or even the Class Gather app. And happy to talk more with you about that after if that's something you want to do. And you can even do it for yourself. Have somebody come in, your coach or a friend or whatever, and say, hey, check me on how much student talk I have. Because sometimes we think we have, oh my gosh, like today, oh my gosh, I don't even want to tell you what the percentage would be of me talking, right? Bad. But sometimes you don't know. And you think, oh yeah, I'm doing really great. And then you go, whoa, it was 80% me? How did that happen? So it's a great, it happens. Especially for us Italian girls, we like to talk. So how do you think about how job embedded at your site? Are you videotaping in a really great classroom that shows a super wonderful kindergarten teacher who's got talk moves and talk structures? Does your 4th grade team need to see that because they're doing all the talking, right? It's so cool when you can have teachers actually doing the PLs rather than you standing up there as an administrator, okay? Now, here's your question for you. So there's a lot of stuff hopefully spinning in your brains right now. How will you incorporate some of the things that we've talked about in our session, connect also back to Ellen's talk this morning, in your either PL or just how to build adult capacity at your site? Go ahead and take a minute and jot some things down that are kind of running through your mind that you want to take back. Maybe it's using the DAP 10 effective strategies. Maybe it's just using Class Gather. Doesn't have to be a huge thing. Doesn't have to be a huge thing. So go ahead and jot something down and go ahead and have a, actually don't have a small chit chat because we're going to do a chit chat a different way. So just write it down. As you're writing that down, let me give you one more to think about, is about your community members, your families. Think about specifically what's right under your nose. We had a principal who said to me, Julie, I've got a lot of people picking up their kids at 1:30 when the kids who are TK and K, but they've got 2nd and 3rd graders. They're not going to walk all the way home and come back an hour later, so they're hanging out for like an hour. Could I use that time with maybe a great volunteer, a homeschool liaison, a resource teacher who I can say do a 45-minute story time? Is that opportunity right there under your nose that you can do that? If you're a teacher, do you use any kind of like a family language or interest survey to find out what talents your parents have that maybe they could come in and share with the group? Think about what's not a whole lot to add to your plate, but what's maybe 1 or 2 things that will have you become that hub for young families. It may be as simple as, does your office manager in the front office know to really greet families with kids in strollers? That kid's going to be your kid in 2 or 3 or 4 years. Are they becoming familiar with that child's name? Honestly, I'm talking about just those things that you could go do tomorrow, or you could get set up to do next year. If you're a principal, do you know the big child care down the street? Have you met the center director? Maybe it's just a cup of coffee to say, hey, you know what? 30% of your kids are coming to my school. Let's talk. What could we do together? Okay? So kind of just think about a few of those things that maybe are doable. Okay? Because it's not about adding tons more to your plate. So you've got 2 questions. You've got, how do you build it at your site with educators? And then you've got, what can I do that's a step in the right direction to grab those young families? Okay, you got that written down? Got it? Okay. So, just a quick, if you ever need data, you can come and talk to me, because that's one of the things that I have to prove the worth of what we are doing. And this actually is very similar to what you heard Ellen talk about this morning, that the blue is not, oh shoot, you guys, that's the purple, sorry. This is the lower percentages, no early learning program. Preschool, the 4-year-old program, is green. TK is the light blue. What percentage of kids were on track in kindergarten assessment the next year? You can see there's a pretty stark difference. We still got a lot of work to do. There's no question about that. But you can see the trend is undeniable. It's undeniable. The other piece that I want to just mention to you has to do with what she said about SELT testing. And if you look very carefully here, the no programs, the kids are at the beginning levels of language. TK, now granted they are a little older, I'll give you that, but you can see that there's much more advanced language as they have preschool and TK. So the CELT scores actually are a nice data point for us in Fresno, okay? Okay, so we're going to just do a quick reflection and do a little closure activity. Finally get you up. Okay, so if you haven't already, think about one piece of information, like the knowledge that you're bringing back with you. What's something that you learned today in the keynote here that is like, okay, now I know that. That's important. Then what's a new idea or a strategy that inspired you? What could you actually bring back as an action? And then think from your lens, your role as a teacher, a support to that person, an administrator, a partner in the work. Come back here. What is one action you can take that will help create this continuum, that progression? And if you use alignment, you can. I won't get mad. But continuum, right? Continuum. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to just kind of jot down the rest there. Now, Sherry, I don't know how your direction sense is, but I'm going to trust you. So we might be completely off, but this is called north, south, east, west. North is going to be there, whether it is or not, I don't know. You've got south up here. I don't know if this will stay. Yes, it will. Perfect. And then we have west and it should be the other way around. That's okay. Sherry, I love you to death, but you don't know your directions. So, so we're just going to pretend. So this is kind of a fun little mix and mingle. Take your whatever you jot down with you, so you'll have your little notes. All right, I'm going to call out a category that you're going to sort yourself by, and I know we're kind of cramped in here, so just kind of mix and mingle and shimmy as you go along. Okay, so we're going to go north-south first. So end here and here. So you're going to when you get to your place, you're going to summarize a new learning from our session, or you can throw in from Ellen's. Okay, so here's the category. If you are a morning person, go north. If you are a late night hawk, go south. And there's nothing in between, so you got to pick. So north is you're an early morning person, and if you're a late night person, shimmy yourself down this way. Grab a partner in your north-south group and chat for just a minute about a new piece of knowledge or learning you have to bring back with you today. This room is really not conducive for this. Can I partner with you? Yes.
I mean, nobody can answer what my was. Nobody
We're starting a TK classroom this fall, a separate class.
Go, which is south of Turlock, just before Atwater, and I have a TK combo, and right now I have 10 and 13. I'm thinking that like next year my class is now at 10, 5, so I think we're kind of heading stuff.
Okay, well that's exciting. Well, my
shouldn't be. They're out of the alignment.
Is very focused around the app that she showed us.
Yeah, I understand what she's saying.
And I downloaded it to the app that will measure the percentage between the teacher talk and the student talk, but it also actually has a bunch of other really cool features. So it's a pretty extensive program, and so I'm planning on working on that because I do recognize the value, and I have a lot of English language learners at my school, so I really understand how important it is for them to be learning. And then the other big takeaway for me is, and maybe it's just an affirmation of how important it is to keep the SEL focus also within the cognitive lens and not to see it as a separate thing, and to really understand that it goes hand in hand, and how to really build teachers' capacity around understanding that the social emotional learning is a big part of what's happening to support their cognitive learning.
Yeah, my goal is to include more of the social and emotional development also.
All righty. Okay, very good. Okay, so here's your next one. Now we're going to see if we can try to move east to west. You might have to kind of, good luck to you. Stand on the tables and dance on the tables. No, don't tell the Sheraton I said that. Okay, so your second mingle is going to be a strategy, something that's more skill-based that you learned. Okay, so think more about like, now I know that, now I'm going to do this, or I want to do this in my classroom, or I want to teach this particular skill. It's kind of like I added this to my bag of tricks. All right, so if you are, if you could go on a weekend vacation, you're going to go either east to the mountains or west to the beach. Which one is it? East to the mountains, that's your choice, or, and you got to pick one. You gotta pick one. Are you on mountains or are you going beach? I know, because I love them both, actually. And then find yourself a partner.
Who's got a strategy they're taking now?
I was thinking one of the things was just the continuum idea and really thinking about this skill across the grades. So as we're adding TK in our charter organization, thinking about, okay, we've done K, what does it look like in TK? How can that help TK's program getting stronger?
Okay, you guys, for your final question, okay, it's so tight in here, I'm not going to have you mingle. I'm just going to have you stay where you are. And let's do this a little different. So hang out right where you are. The last question is, what will you do? What is your commitment? Okay, and remember, a commitment is something that you do well after the time you're out of the mood you were in when you made that commitment, right? Not a good one? I saw that online. I didn't make it up. So, let's do this. Brave souls, shout out. What's your commitment? Come on, let's do it. Tell me.
Principal Academy.
Ah, love it. I'm telling you, I love it. It's great stuff. Totally happy to help you with it too. What else? We're on it. What else?
I'm inviting the parents waiting outside before dismissal to come onto the multi-purpose room and start connecting with them.
Fantastic. Beautiful. What else? Another commitment. Oh, okay, so we've got Principal Academy. We've got inviting students in, parents in during that kind of transition time. What else? Come on, I know there's more commitments. Give me two more. Let's go.
Similar, but our preschool has a bus drop right outside my TK classroom.
Okay.
And I have parents and younger siblings out there for up to an hour after our career.
Oh, wow.
We're going to start doing monthly meet and greets. And
Great.
even though I won't get some of their kids, it'll just be building capacity.
But it's building for the community. Okay, so building community and capacity through inviting for, say, a monthly get-together, and you can do that with different topics. And oh my gosh, I love the idea. Let's give me one more to take us home.
My commitment is to increase the articulation between our preschool programs and our TK.
Fantastic. So making sure that you're articulating between those early grades. And let me give you an example of something you can do because people are really hot into the foundational skills. If you Google building the foundation, it's out of the Center for Instruction out of Florida. It is a continuum document. That's K5. You could take the foundations and that document, and you might even look at how that goes. If it goes well with your pre-K, TK, even K, you could look at adding some grade levels. All right. So let me just tell you, we are through for the morning. Gosh, that went so fast. I had a great time with you guys. This is my cell phone. I have a card. I told you that I probably will be leaving Fresno sometime in the summer, looking toward coming back to this area. I don't have any specific plans yet. That's my cell phone though, and I'm always good on that. If you are interested in getting more specifics about things, happy to help support you. Would love to connect and learn from you as well. It's been a great time with you guys. Thank you so much.